Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Humans of Heritage. I am your host, Adam Gilfillan. It is an exciting time for me to be here and be a part of this podcast. Hopefully you've had a chance to listen to some of our previous episodes, and if you haven't yet, make sure you go and do so. And if you have, make sure you remind yourself to subscribe to it so you get the reminder every time a new episode comes up. Today I'm excited to be back here in front of the camera, or maybe you're just listening to audio and you're hearing me behind the microphone. I'm excited to be here again with our guest today. Usually the podcasts that I've done in the past, I've had a chance to already know who the individual was. But when looking for new guests, our guest today was recommended, was suggested, and even before coming here, I sent a message off to somebody to ask, like, hey, tell me a bit about my guest today. And they said, you're really going to enjoy sitting down with this individual. You're going to have a fun time, really easygoing. And funny enough, that person actually was the one who suggested that I interview this person. And so I'm really looking forward to my guest today. And so if you're listening or you're watching, I want to welcome our guest to Humans of Heritage, Robert Schweitzer, also known as Dr. Bob or just Bob to many people.
Right.
Well, it's very nice to meet you for the first time. And as many would know, I've been at this school before. I attended this school, but you weren't here when I was here. So tell me a bit about your journey to get to Heritage, and then we'll kind of recap some of the things over the course of your lifetime as a teacher and even beyond teaching.
Okay, well, it depends on how much detail you want, but I grew up in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Parents were university professors, so academics was what we had to excel in.
Yeah.
And so Oklahoma State University, went to graduate school at the University of Rochester in upstate New York, and then did a postdoc at Yale University in chemistry department, which is already a shift. And then I was on a path to be university professor.
Wow.
And I said, I don't like this. I feel like I'm going to be trapped. It was just like a gut feeling. I didn't know what else I wanted to do at the time. But if I looked at my group leader at Yale, he's an amazing guy. I can tell you a lot about him, but he's an amazing guy. He's had an office at Yale University, professor. And I looked at that. He goes to that same office every day of his life. I said, I just can't do that.
Yeah.
I got to break out of that. And I'm not saying I would have been at the level of Yale, but I just had a sense I needed to do something else. So I got a book called What Color's Your Parachute? And there's a chapter in there about informational interviewing. So I started calling, and it took 13 months of, here's a lead, here's an idea, and then you get another lead. And basically you network till you find the job. It took 13 months. I ended up in industry. I was working in pharmaceutical drug discovery. I was a small group leader in core technology, and we had clients from like 5 sites around the world. And we'd travel to visit them, or they'd come to us. Basically, they'd send us projects. I worked for this big pharmaceutical, the Swiss company. And I worked for them for 5.5 years. And at the time, I was taking singing lessons, 2 or 3 yoga classes a week, Alexander technique lessons, and earning a lot of money, doing highly intellectual, stimulating, intellectually.
Wow.
And something wasn't working.
Yeah.
Right? All these things that else I was doing, I was looking for something else. And the Alexander technique led me out of there. And so I moved to Montreal after 5.5 years in that role. Studied to be an Alexander technique teacher. It's a 3-year, 1,600-hour training. And then I started self-employment, working as an Alexander technique teacher. But I really was lousy at self-promotion.
Okay.
So I got to like 20 hours a week, and I needed like 30 to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I gave myself 4 years when I started to try it. And then after 5 years, because I really wanted to make it work, but I just didn't promote enough. So it's on me, right?
Yeah.
But so I got a part-time job teaching high school and doing Alexander technique. And then I heard about the masters at McGill University for people who already have a degree can get a teaching certificate in 2 years. So I applied for that, was accepted,
Okay.
and then did the 2-year McGill. And by this time, I was out of money.
Wow.
I mean, I was 2-3 months from defaulting on my mortgage.
Wow.
And stressed, intense, not exercising, doing this master's. And so I said, I got to find a job now.
Yeah.
So I typed up letters. I'd go online. I'd say, okay, here's the principal. I'd address the letter, put my picture on it, get my CV. And my way is not to send them in.
Yeah.
I just go. So I went to 26 schools.
Wow.
The 24th of them happened to be in Saint-Lambert, the alternate school. And I walked in, handed her my CV. It was one of the times the principal was actually there because I'm doing this in summer and people are away. But this was sort of, I'd done Montreal, Island Montreal where I live, and I started on the South Shore, and so I went in and she happened to be there. She said, okay, thank you. She's about to put it away and she looked at the CV and something caught her eye. I said, okay, wait. So she sat me down. This is Judy Leonard. She sat me down and interviewed me on the spot.
Wow.
And then she set up an interview here. Fred Noirfelis interviewed me, and then in Saint-Jean.
Okay.
On that same day. And I had letters ready for them.
Yeah.
But, so I could walk in and hand them the CV. And I just was in the right place at the right time. She says, I need a science teacher. We had to let our science teacher let go. So how did I get into at-risk students? I was totally unprepared.
Yeah. Well, I want
to... And ended up there because that was the place where they needed someone.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask because, in reading some details about you and teaching at alternate school, and one of the highlights is at-risk kids.
Yeah.
Most people, when they hear alternate school, they think, write-offs. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Kids who too troubled to work in the school system, too this, too that, and they're labeled immediately, right?
Yeah.
So for you saying unprepared,
I was unprepared because look where I came from,
Yeah.
This highly academic family. It took me several years to learn how to do that better.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm as good as the people who were already there. Like there's Patrick Grandy here who was there for like 8-9 years before me, and a few other teachers. Two of them one's retired, one is doing something else. But one of the other, those people knew the business.
Yeah.
And they helped me. But it was a big transition. None of my training prepared me for it. But it's through that.
Yeah.
It's through that I think I know I try really hard to connect with students who aren't fitting. No.
Yeah.
It's part of what I try to do.
Yeah.
But I landed in a position where I had to learn on the fly.
So going into a place like that, learning on the fly, like you say, what do you think you had to learn? Like I know learn how to teach, students that with the background they might have had, but for you, what was the thing or the moment that it clicked, like I know how to reach them, or I know, how to communicate better to that type of student? What was that learning process for you?
It wasn't a click moment. It's gradual,
Okay.
painfully learned lessons one at a time.
Yeah.
And I know Judy would say it, and it's about the connection. But you don't understand what that means until you try and build a connection with people who grew up completely different from you.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I went to the place, I have to just be me.
Yeah, for sure.
I just treat everybody as a human being. And you realize everybody wants to learn. I mean, these are all the things you've heard.
Yeah.
Everybody does want to learn.
Yeah.
Right? And not everybody finds school fun, but it's the connection. I don't try and teach anything until I build a connection.
Yeah.
I don't try to influence people in the hallway. I don't try to get them to move or do till I've at least tried to talk to them. Hey, my name is Bob. What's your name?
Yeah.
And if you don't have a connection, I don't think you should be.
Yeah.
You got to get that first. So how did I know that? It's just by having it happen.
Yeah.
over several years. So how do I connect with people that are different from me? Is just start talking to them and realize what their lives are like and how challenging it is to find out some of the things our students live with. It's intense.
Did you ever want to quit when you first started? I'm getting to know you now, so I know people. There's some people who are like, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to learn this stuff. For you, was there ever that moment? I know you say no, but was there ever that moment where you're like, can I actually do this?
Quit? No, because in the sense, but I did try to move into things that I was better at. Naturally, I sought out the physics. And I was told no, and then somebody went and talked to somebody, and this guy's I don't think I go year by year. And at the beginning in August, if I start the year, I made a commitment to whoever walks in that door. And my commitment is I will never give up on you. That thing, when I realized, and the guys told me, they said students will forgive anything except one thing. You give up on them. So you have to never give up. And it starts as sort of an intellectual realization, but you realize that's who I gotta be. For me to be successful as a teacher, I make a commitment every year in August that I will finish the year, and I will not miss class. Don't take me out of my classroom. We have these other pushes and pulls. They want to take us out. I fight that as much as I can. Don't take me out of my classroom. I'm committed to this group of people who walked in the door.
Well, it's funny you say
that's important.
For sure, and it's funny.
And so just to answer your question, because what I ever think about quitting, I would never quit in the middle of the year, but I did move to where things that I thought I was better at.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, for people who are listening or watching, they weren't privy to our conversation before we started rolling, and you said to me, you said, at 12:15.
I'm walking out that door.
I'm walking out that door.
Because
whether we finish early or I'm walking out that door. And so when I hear you say,
that's why
I'm committed to that class, and I knew that based off of that first conversation. Which I can appreciate. And I agree. That students are looking for somebody who believe in them and believe in them enough to stick around. Right. You often hear about students who when they write somebody off, it's usually because they've been written off first. Right. And they're looking for somebody to stick around and to be committed. They might give you a hard time.
Oh, that's normal.
They might push every single button, but they want to know, are you in this? Right.
And no test.
Which is awesome.
One other thought, just is that in what growth have I done in, I'm still learning, I'm still really growing through this work, is how much it's true that anyone can learn anything. It's, and we get, he's good in math, she's smart. No, that's not it. Some people have better aptitudes, but it's been shown you can take anyone in this school and teach them calculus. Adult, student, you just got to go incrementally from the place they're at. And they need to convince them that's what they want to do. You get someone who's motivated, you find a way to motivate them, I can do this. So that's the other message I learned. I saw it happen, and then you realize, okay. And so that anybody can learn anything is the reality of the human brain. And when I was growing up, that's not what we were taught. We were taught, he's good at math, let's excel at math. Maybe you want to go with your strong suits, but anybody can learn anything. And that's the reality of the human brain. And in our society, we're sort of fixed mindset where we have certain abilities, we're going to go. Well, the problem with that is eventually you max out. But that's not the human brain. The human brain can learn basically anything. And all the people out there are gifted with this amazing tool. They can learn anything. You just got to set it up as much as you can so that you go one step at a time.
Yeah.
And so that's the problems with school, is that we're saying, okay, you got to be here by the end of the year. And for some of them, they're starting here. And if we could get them here this year and say, hey, great job, we'd be better off. But the pressures of a standardized system, I understand.
Yeah.
There's no solution that's going to solve every problem. But people get left behind a lot and don't believe they can do it because they've not succeeded. But that's not the message. You can do it, just you've been in a situation where you didn't. But it doesn't, you can do anything. That's been shown, right?
Yeah.
And so seeing it happen, that really, it goes from an intellectual understanding to a reality.
That's awesome. What that passion to stick it out and to be committed to that class, that dedication to the individual and to the group, along your journey growing up, school, high school, university, was there anybody along the way that you learned that from? Like, where does that come from?
I'll tell you a story my dad told me. He said, because he was really pissed off at me one time, and he said, when you were young, you were so caring, because apparently when I could just walk, I wasn't really necessarily speaking, I just was getting around. If somebody was upset in the family, I'd go over and I'd comfort them as a baby, as a child. So that's part of my personality. I'm highly intellectual. I went far down that path, but I was looking for something else. When I started teaching, that unfulfilled part in me became fulfilled. So part of it comes from my personality of becoming fulfilled by helping other people.
Wow.
And education is great for that. I didn't have room in industry to do that. And as our company, I won't go into the details of that, but our group was basically breaking up because they were relocating the big, like 500 researchers to another location. And so basically they were shedding employees. And people were coming up in the hall and saying, you should be a teacher. It's later, and I realized that when I started teaching, it was teaching Alexander technique, but this does the same. There's something that's fulfilled in my personality. So if you ask where it comes in part recognizing who I am. I think I would have got there sooner if my father wasn't a teacher.
Really?
He was a professor, but so I didn't want to be like him at all.
Yeah.
It's like, the immaturity you have when you're young.
For sure.
Because now I can see the great stuff I have in me from him, and some of the things I don't like in him are still in me.
Yeah.
But he's a human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so I think it's really from partly who I am.
So you say that you would have learned earlier if your dad wasn't a teacher.
My dad was a professor.
Professor.
And I just was frustrated with him.
Okay.
As a young person. I thought, go for it, man. Come on.
Yeah.
He just felt always, but he grew up in the 20s. Great Depression.
Yeah.
They didn't have anything. They were hungry.
Yeah.
They were literally hungry when he was a kid. And he worked really hard to give us, a middle-class life and educate himself. His father wasn't educated. So but then here's the next generation with all these opportunities. I just felt like he was always holding us back, And he's like, okay, don't be too ambitious, don't go too far. That was part of the message, I felt like.
Yeah.
And so I was frustrated with that.
Yeah.
But you look inside, does my father love me? Did he love me? Yeah. And that makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
But you're going to have, some people always, it's part of being a teenager.
Well, absolutely.
And then you grow up a little bit. Maybe I was just slow growing up.
Oh, that's awesome. It's true. We as a younger teenagers, you don't always think you're learning stuff from your parents or necessarily want to at times.
Yeah.
but then you look back and you're like, okay, I learned this. And I learned
This
that.
is actually good things.
Yeah. Like I often say this about like my mom's family specifically. Like I learned to laugh from my mom and her family.
Yeah.
Because I would be in the other room or the basement, I'd hear her and her sisters laughing, right? And I learned my humor from my grandfather and my aunt, who's similar to me in her sense of humor, and you pick up on those things. You don't pick up on it until later on in life. And
Right,
like,
and you've used humor in your life, you were telling me.
absolutely, humor is a very big part of who I am. For me, humor, it kind of brings down the walls.
Yeah, yeah.
And allows people.
Way to bring down the walls?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've learned the ability to make fun of myself a lot.
Nice. Yeah.
Love who I am.
And
I'm
love who you
not
are.
full of myself, but I love who I am, so I'm confident enough that when I say those jokes
Right
or
on.
whatever, it's not to tear me down, it's to make a neutral playing field basically for
Right.
everybody, because everybody wants to laugh.
Right.
But if I pick this person, well, they may miss out on laughing.
Right.
So I use me, and
Yeah.
it goes from there. So, but I do enjoy it. The question that I have that I found interesting when looking at your, kind of a background of who you were, and we talked about this briefly, but physics,
Yeah.
it's who you are.
Highly intellectual.
Yeah, school, but then you also were part of like the arts,
Yeah.
acting.
Well, I a little. It's more performance.
More
performance arts, more dance. Yeah.
So, excuse my naivete sort of thing, right? Like, how do those two mix?
Well, in the beginning, for me, they didn't.
Yeah.
It's like I felt like I had this part of me and that part of me, and that they lived separately.
Yeah.
I grew up highly intellectual. What were we rewarded for in the family was good grades.
Yeah.
If I asked, I'm bored, what do you want to do? I was handed a book.
Okay.
So highly intellectual. I didn't know about myself other than my intellect till my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's like a really narrow understanding of yourself. So I grew up this like really brainy person, and that was causing problems in my life because I wasn't understanding relationships. I wasn't understanding how to, some things I went through divorce, I think. It's like, okay, I got to learn something here. Mm-hmm. And so I had bad posture when I was young. I don't think it's perfect now, but I would lean, whenever I'd stand, I would lean against something.
Yeah.
Right? We'd do it. And a friend of mine said, you have backaches. Look at every time we stop moving, you're going to lean against the table. Mm-hmm. You can't support yourself on your own 2 feet. She was a dancer, so she's like watching this. And she said, I bet you would benefit from the Alexander technique. So I looked it up and I said, oh, okay, $70 an hour or whatever it was at the time. I said, yeah, that ain't happening now.
Yeah.
But I kept it in the back of my head. I did yoga instead, which helped, but I had severe sciatica. Mm-hmm. I had it up until 2001. I was out of work for 6 months because my sciatic nerve was so badly pinched and then damaged.
Wow.
So Alexander technique is a way to relearn a coordination. If you're a violinist and you have a lot of tension, but you put 10,000 hours or whatever the number is learning to play really well, but with this tension, but now this tension is starting to cause you so much pain you can no longer play. How do you unlearn 10,000 hours and learn to be more relaxed?
Yeah.
Alexander technique is great for that. If you grew up in a low class, part of the town, and your posture is a certain way, or your way of, and you need to play the king on stage, right? You went into acting, great. You got to learn to stop your old neuromuscular habits and let something else grow. So when I could finally afford it, I was, again, up against it money-wise out of my postdoc and divorce. And then, so I went and got the highest paying job I could. It had to have three things. It had to have an overall positive goal, it had to have biology in it, and it had to allow me to do international travel.
Okay.
Those were my criteria. And I had to pay really well. So I ended up for science, one of the best paying jobs there is in pharmaceutical. And it was a good company. I got lucky and landed in a company that I could function well in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the back pain, though, was still there. And so when I could finally afford it,
Yeah.
I went and found an Alexander Technique teacher. And I was at a yoga class in New York City, and I pulled off the cork board on the outside. I pulled an announcement off that someone had put, one of her students, and I found a great Alexander Technique teacher. And so every Thursday, I'd leave at 3. I worked it out with my boss, and I'd drive through and then take the PATH train into New York, and then go to Midtown and take an Alexander lesson.
Wow.
And then come back through the tunnels. Or most of the time on Thursdays, I'd go see a dance show. And so it's just this Alexander technique gets you connected with your physical, neuromuscular, and then therefore your emotional self. Because you can't learn the body without learning all the emotional part, because the body is where the emotion is expressed.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to integrate the intellectual understanding, that took years.
Yeah.
That took years of just growing and learning. So Alexander technique is used by performing artists. So my Alexander technique teacher said, well, maybe you should try, I don't know, go try dance. Try contact improvisation. So when I moved here, I joined a community of contact improvisation, and I danced there for quite a number of years. And I started training as an Alexander technique teacher because I wanted to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
They said, if you want to know this really well, go become a teacher.
Wow.
And in the first 4 months of studying Alexander technique, there was an open call they needed people to do a dance show. So it was Andrew Forster and Suzanne Miller, Andrew's still an artist in Montreal, and Suzanne is still a choreographer, dancer in Montreal. They needed a bunch of bodies. So I said, I'll go. And so I, in that one show, made all these friends and connections that lasted for many years.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, and one of they had team leaders. One of the team leaders, she said, oh, well, we could get Bob in with a project with Andrew. And so it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Because once I got in there, and then once they became known as a performing artist, then you would get other opportunities. And so it snowballed from one place. But if I wasn't doing the Alexander technique, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Wow.
It gives you the ability to set aside and live in the world, set aside the intellectual and live in the world in a little different way, and teaches you how to be well on stage.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, that's how I got into it. It's just
That's awesome.
sort of through,
No, that's great.
which I think is the way life is, you know.
No, absolutely.
My life.
Absolutely. Well, I have a couple more serious questions in a moment, but this one is just more personally, and more so because my goal was not to pursue education after I finished.
Right, okay.
Really, I knew that, I loved school because of sports.
Yeah, right.
I played sports a lot, and that was really the passion behind
You
coming to
said
school.
basketball.
Basketball, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember in grade 8, my mom said to me that she was going to take me to basketball because my grades weren't good. And I said to her, I said, you realize it's the only reason why I go to school,
Right.
But sports has always been a part of my life, and so education wasn't, on the top of my list. For you, you said Yale, Oklahoma State,
University of Rochester.
right,
Yeah,
so there's more. So here's my question for people who are going off to school later. Is there really that big of a difference when it comes to, like, we all hear about Yale. Yale is, Harvard, Yale, Oklahoma State. Like, is there...
So what's the difference?
What's the difference?
There is a difference.
Yeah?
Not the quality of the students.
Okay.
And not the quality of the material, but the difference is in the sense of entitlement that you gain
Okay.
by going to a prestigious school.
Okay.
every step in the system, people decide not to do that anymore. Those who go to university, okay. Some did not. So the intellectually challenging or the intellectually hardworking people tend to concentrate on each step. My professors at University of Rochester or at Oklahoma State, they were as good as Yale. But the Yale people, they are a slight notch above in terms of their ambition, and some of them in terms of their ability.
Yeah.
There's a few. Like my group leader he had a memory. He remembered everything. Cataloged it all. He read the papers, and he had a memory. There's 3 people in my life I can think of that had these amazing memories. He's one of those 3.
Okay.
Then they would remember your conversation from 3 years ago when they met you once.
Yeah.
They know what you talked about. There's 3 people in my life I've met with that kind of memory.
Wow.
He was one of them. So he had something. But in terms of the students, they're not smarter.
Yeah.
And again, smartness is just how you can become smarter through hard work. But they come from families or they come from places where this is what they wanted to do and their family supported them, and they get there and you come away with a sense of entitlement. I'm among the elite. I'm going to be able to go to this school or that school. You get this sense of I'm one of the successful people.
Wow.
And that in itself is huge. And then you're around people who are ambitious and hardworking, and what are you going to do? You're going to work hard and be ambitious, or you don't fit in. So they surround themselves by people who are headed all in the same direction. That's the major difference. Sense of entitlement, but every step along the way you get to people who are more driven, have worked harder, maybe more gifted to start with in this area. Not to take away that you can't learn anything, but some people learn physics really quick. Some don't. Some people have to work really hard to get there.
Yeah. No,
I would say entitlement is, if you want a single word
thing?
answer.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing.
That's the answer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have 3 last questions. I want to respect your time because I know at 12:15 you're walking out this door.
Yeah, we got
some time.
We got some time. We're good.
But I'm curious, especially, there's students who are going to be listening to this.
Yeah.
And even some parents.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned a couple of times in your journey to get to where you are, the struggles that were there.
Yeah.
Mortgage payments, right? I got to get a job,
Gotta find a job.
There's been struggles along the way. And I know I asked about quitting when you were teaching at the alternate school, but I'm curious to go through those moments. And for some, those are quitting moments.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether that be I'm changing everything or sometime even more drastic than that.
Yeah,
right?
no, okay.
For
sure.
Along the way, was there for you a place of, this is rock bottom, and whatever that level would be for you, what was it that kept you going? That's saying, I need to stay the course.
I think you learn that. When I finished Oklahoma State University, I applied to graduate schools, and then I took a year off and got my backpack and traveled alone in Europe for 14 months.
Yeah.
In that time, I learned how to survive on the street. I felt like you could throw me at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, out in the street anywhere in Europe, and I would make it through fine. You traveling on your own, so I learned it. And the early successes came from the support of my parents, particularly my mother, who helped me through. Mom, and I tell this to my students, I got an English paper due. When's it due? Tomorrow. It's 8 o'clock at night or later. She says, okay. Sits down, and I would provide the sentences. I would have to speak. I think I just hit the mic. Yeah. I would provide the sentences, but she would write it out on this, old typewriter.
Yeah.
The levers like this. And, we'd have to write on it because I'd I'd say, no way. But basically, I would dictate my English paper to her.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then she'd type it up while I went to bed. Now, that had the benefit of me coming through, because what I could speak at a level that was going to be successful, but it stole from me the opportunity to learn how to fail and then be successful.
Yeah.
How to solve this problem of time organization, because I'm terrible at it.
Yeah.
I struggle with it all the time now. But when I was in high school, I couldn't do it at all. Last minute. Through university, it wasn't until into graduate school, and particularly when I graduated and was at Yale, I learned to get things done on some semblance of a time frame. Mm-hmm. But I'm terrible at that. So it's still a struggle. So what it was is I had early successes, and then I put myself in a situation where it was, I'm on my own.
Yeah.
And, harvesting grapes in France, I had some money put aside, always sort of finding ways to work in the black market in Germany, and just all those things that I did, hitchhiking, got kicked out of a car, and you're in the middle of nowhere, find a bush and go sleep under the bush. Wow. And then get up in the morning and then keep going. Being at risk, mm-hmm. Being in threatening situations and diffusing those. I learned that if 3 rules, one of those rules is you always tell the truth when you're out in the world. Sometimes the truth sounds weird.
Yeah.
Right? But you could invent something that sounds more realistic. But you tell the truth. There's something about that sincerity in the person communicates. Man, you scare the heck out of me.
Yeah.
That statement to a threatening person can help. Right? And so my other rules were always start with a question that needs an answer. Don't say hello. You're out in the world, you want to start a conversation. I'm traveling on my own for 14 months. I have to get out of my shell and start talking to people. I loved the travel. So that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But traveling on my own forced me to learn. You start with a question that needs an answer. That question could be, hey, is there any live music? Just take the context.
Yeah.
Invent a question to start the conversation, and then once you get the conversation going, you can learn something. You can interact with people. But if you start with hello, it's hello and it's over.
Yeah,
it's gone. So you start with the question that needs an answer, and always respect the other person's right not to be in the conversation. If clearly this person doesn't want to talk to you after you've attempted, it's fine. Mm-hmm. Those were my 3 rules. And one of them, I'm sure it saved my life more than once.
Really?
Yeah. Be honest. You scare the out of me.
Yeah.
Diffuse the situation.
Wow. Mm. And those 3 rules, traveling, so that you find implementing them in all the areas, especially the telling the truth part.
Yeah.
Impacts.
Well, it just becomes part of who you are.
Yeah.
But if you want to start a conversation with a stranger, it's a lot harder now because everybody's like this.
Yes.
You know? Say hello to students in the hall all the time. They don't hear me.
Yeah.
And so I confront them. I say, you were just rude to me. No, sir, I'm listening. I said hi to you. We're in the world.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't buy into this always being plugged into your earphones. Maybe you do it just as, no, I don't buy it.
Yeah. My next question, and I asked this to Ms. Saha, the principal, in my first interview. Today's your last day, right?
Imagine it's my last day.
Yeah, I'm not actually telling you on behalf of the principal that you're leaving.
There you go. Okay, I was wondering.
But today's your last day. How would you like students, teachers, staff to remember Dr. Bob? What would you hope they said about you as a teacher, as a person?
he tried.
Yeah.
At some level, he gave it his best effort in a way. Because
Yeah.
I'm imperfect
Yeah.
as a teacher. There's some students just can't stand me,
Mm-hmm.
my method of teaching, and others who really like it. So I'm trying my best, and the other thing I do, I don't know if, I just try to meet people they're just a person, right? Just
Yeah.
treat everybody more or less the same in a way, not in a way that's value everybody the same, where they are in the hierarchy of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the person cleaning, say hi to them, or the students, or the principal.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect at it, but someone who treated everyone well.
Yeah.
That's what I aim for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Now, my final question, it's my favorite question to ask people. I ask a different version of it to high school students, but
Okay.
for adults, if you can go back to high school you, what would you tell yourself about life? Now that where you are now, where you were in high school, if you can go back to high school you, what would you tell yourself about life?
You're enough.
Yeah.
What you got is enough. Don't worry about, right? It's like when we're young, and I think even later in life, is this enough?
Mm.
Is this enough
Yeah.
physically, mentally, emotionally? And the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was an extremely introverted kid and very academic, but just like relax a bit, man, you're fine.
Yeah.
Everybody's fine. What
Yeah.
you got is enough. And I would tell that to any young person.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know I asked a student that question about a year ago, and they answered back with, the way I asked them is, what would you ask future you about life?
Mm-hmm.
And they asked, am I happy?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, when you think of that question at times, you think, okay, will I get married? Will I have lots of money? Will I have this job, whatever? But their simple question was, am I happy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ties into you're enough.
Yeah, it is.
Because oftentimes we tend to think that if I'm not finding that happiness in this, and this, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I that. So to say I'm enough or you are enough, I think is a very, valuable piece of information that people need to hold on to. That no matter what situation they find themselves in, no matter what others may think about them, we're enough.
Yeah.
That we're good the way we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy, another word I use is fulfilled for the same thinking.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can be fulfilled and grieving a loss of a person.
Absolutely.
And so happiness is partly a response to and so we use it a lot, I understand, but I tend to replace it with,
yes,
are you fulfilled?
Yes.
But I agree, as a young person, if you realize that what you have is enough, you just work with what you got and you'll be fine.
That's awesome.
People are going to accept you. That's the major thing to being accepted is you just say, oh, I'm like this, deal with it, and then people like you.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing a bit about your story and allowing me the opportunity to get to know you, but also allowing those who would listen an opportunity to get to know a little bit more about who you are, where you've come from, the struggles, the success along the way. And I'm glad you didn't have to walk out during the middle of the interview to do your class.
Good timing. Well, thanks for doing this, Adam. I have a sense that people gain by seeing the depth, not just the adults, but the students as well. So it's a fun project you got. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Again, we started this project, Humans of Heritage, because we wanted to give students and teachers, staff, an opportunity to share their story. I'm a firm believer that stories have the power to change lives, that your journey through struggle or your journey to success might encourage somebody else along the way. And so we want to share your story. And so This has been another episode of Humans of Heritage, but there are more to come. And one of those episodes hopefully can be your story. And so somebody along the way might suggest your name, or maybe you want to tell your story. Find somebody that you can talk to tell your story as a part of the Humans of Heritage project. And I look forward to sitting down and talking with you and changing lives with your story. So again, my name is Adam. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Bob, for being with us today, and we look forward to our next episode. Have a good one.